There are a lot of dilemmas out there. How about vegans aren't supposed to be sick? Ooh, that's a tough one. And how about, well, we're vegan, we really ought to all be eating the same thing. And you can't really be a vegan unless animals are your primary motivation. Or if you're an ethical vegan, you're probably eating junk food. Oh, please. The outside world has enough acrimony. We don't need it among ourselves. And for that reason, we are bringing on the great healer, the great connector, and my great friend, Chef AJ.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm so excited. It's been so long since we've spoken.
It has been a while. So, hi everybody. If you've just happened to wander in here, I am Victoria Moran, and this is the Main Street Vegan program, where we try to bring you every aspect of what is going on under this wonderful umbrella of ahimsa and nonviolence and eating healthy and feeling vital and trying to get through life as kindly as we can. And I can't think of a whole lot of people who exemplify all of that more than my guest today, Chef AJ. You already know Chef AJ. Her YouTube channel has 250,000 followers. She is an author. Wonderful cookbook, Unprocessed, is one I use really, really often. And she's spoken for thousands and thousands of people. She has made so many vegans and so many healthy vegans with her wonderful plant-based recipes and all of her fabulous outreach. And just a little bit of trivia in case you didn't know, Chef AJ started her career as a comic, and she was once, at least once, on The Tonight Show. Welcome, Chef
Oh, thank
AJ.
you. Yeah, I still want to be a comedian. That's what, I really do. I know it might be too late, but that's really what I want to be when I grow up.
Well, it's tough to be a comedian these days. I had Audrey Dunham on. Actually, she hasn't been on yet. We've recorded. She's going to be played in September because she has a holiday cookbook. But her husband is Jeff Dunham,
Of
very,
course,
very popular.
I love them both. I saw him in person in Lincoln, and he is the funniest person I
Oh,
think I've
he's so
seen.
funny. And some people think vegans can't be funny.
Oh, that's not true at all.
That's not true.
You're
Not true at all.
hilarious.
Not true at all. So, AJ, I was just thinking, as I was thinking about what we would talk about, of all the things we have in common. So we've both been vegan for over 40 years. We both do it for animals and for health. We're both Aries. We're both obesity survivors. We both, in recent memory, lost our soul dog and then adopted another one who was like, oh my gosh, maybe you get more than one soul dog in a lifetime. And we've both heard the words nobody wants to hear. It is malignant. So, hi. I don't know if I left anything out.
No, let's see. Air, no, that's pretty much we're both authors.
We're both authors, yes, and we're both in love with our husbands. That's a good thing too.
Yeah, we both have good husbands.
We do. We do. So, AJ, you have been very, very vocal about your cancer diagnosis and treatment. And I know that it was a little bit scary at first. And I believe now that you just feel that it's brought so much love from so many quarters that you wish you talked about it sooner. But just tell us a little bit about that
Yeah.
journey.
Well, it was a really difficult decision whether or not I should come out with it because there were people that were advising me not to, specifically because they thought it might hurt veganism. Because here I am, a vegan for almost 50 years, and now I get lung cancer. And so I was advised maybe not to share it for that reason. I was also advised to share it not for other reasons, like because people would then be making lots of comments on what I should do, which is still happening. However, being an Aries, I'm not the best at keeping secrets anyway, so don't tell me anything like that. Yeah, and not, I just, it was very hard for me to keep it in because I felt that by keeping it in, I couldn't get any support because it was just a handful of people that knew other than the doctors, just some very close friends. I hadn't even told all of my family. And, I learned so many things that were helpful because, especially when you are on YouTube, for example, people had some great ideas, things that I was able to implement if I hadn't shared. But also, I didn't want other people to feel ashamed because they had cancer. Like, you know, people shouldn't be ashamed of having an illness. And yet, when you're vegan, as you know, especially if you're out there in the public eye, an influencer, there's this idea that the vegan diet will fix everything. And I always say it doesn't fix you being an asshole, but as we know by a person that will not be named. And so I think it was really helpful to share it because I felt like, and it's actually, believe it or not, it was an Episcopalian minister of all people that said, the secret is killing you. Because there's a saying, you're only as sick as your secrets. Because I was having appointments with all different people of different faiths, clergy, just because I find them very comforting, and I don't really have a faith per se. I believe in God. And, we were talking and she said, the secret is killing you. And I had kept it in for 2 years. And that's a long time to keep a secret. And then, people were commenting because yes, I did lose almost 20 pounds. And it's like, and it was hurting me because like, oh, you look so bad. You look so thin. And it's like, I wanted to say, well, I'm so sorry. I have cancer. You know, I'm sorry my appearance offends you.
Well, it was really brave. And it's so interesting that you were told that by a clergy person, because I remember early on when you were first telling me about it, you said that you were looking at different doctors and you really liked to have a doctor who believes in God.
Absolutely, especially with cancer, because like I guess I can say this before we started this podcast, we said a little prayer. You said, do you, which is very nice that you said, did I mind? I say, not mind at all. I prefer it. And the doctors that believe in God, it's not like they're necessarily hanging a shingle out saying, I believe in God. But the ones that I've been able to find, and largely they are Adventists, but sometimes they're of different faiths, they will absolutely pray with you before your treatment or before your appointment and during or after. I mean, there's even like things, it's just, I feel like it's a comfort to me when they believe in God because then I don't know. I feel like then they're more open to things, the possibility of healing that is not going to just occur just from the pills, potions, and procedures because they've seen miracles.
Yeah, and they don't mind saying that's what it is. I think sometimes it's very difficult for someone who's spent years studying science and studying the scientific method and just looking at what can be seen to allow that sometimes things happen that we don't understand. And yeah, you had asked me before we went on if I had been public about the cancer diagnosis that I had. And I did announce it on this show. I think it was actually when we were having some difficulty with our distribution and people weren't seeing some of those episodes as much as they have subsequently. Thank goodness. How wonderful when technology is healed, just like when we are healed. But yeah, I had breast cancer diagnosis in April of 2024. And it was kind of interesting in that at first they were saying, oh, it's nothing, come back in 3 months, which I thought was weird because they always tell you with cancer, it's all about early detection. But I came back in 3 months and the radiologist was like, no, now this time I don't like it. And I want you to get an MRI. And anyway, long and short of it, then they wanted me to do some other kind of thing that I would have to wait 6 more weeks for. And our lovely friend, Dr. Frank Sabatino, said, you need to call Dr. Christy Funk, the breast cancer surgeon in LA. And I'm like, oh my goodness, she's some kind of celebrity surgeon. She's not going to remember me. And he's like, no, she'll remember you. She was on your podcast. And so I sent her the MRI report. And bless her heart, she wrote back and said, you need this looked at. If I were here, I would do it. So that's what I did. It's like if God didn't make frequent flyer miles for this, what are they for? So I went out there And she said, you know what? I'm not even going to do the biopsy because I've looked at it. Whatever it is, you want it out. And so tomorrow is my day off. If you don't mind having it done in a surgical center instead of a hospital, I can do it. And so I did. And it was malignant, but it was stage one, and there was no lymph involvement. And I've had my two 6 month and 12-month scans, and I'm good. So I don't talk about it because I don't really think about it. I also know, I'm not out of the woods. They say for what I had, you're out of the woods in 2 years. I believe that mine was because I took bioidentical hormones for years and years and years. And the truth is, I love taking them. And now a lot of people are talking about, well, maybe we should look again at hormones. It's like, yeah, I felt really good. And I never had any hot flashes when I was on them. And now I'm having hot flashes at 75. So, it's kind of like life and how we're dealing with it. So tell us about your journey so far, Chef AJ. What's happened? What are the kind of main memories, main things you've experienced, main things you've learned?
Learn from what? From having cancer?
Yeah.
Well, that there's a lot of uncertainty in life, and that if you don't learn to control your anxiety about uncertainty, cancer is going to be much harder.
How interesting. I was proofreading a blog post for Main Street Vegan. This lovely woman has written about her sweet little dog that she adopted, and he was just in such precarious health. And she said he was guarded as serious. And that was a kind of terminology I wasn't used to. So I Googled it and it said, well, that's medical terminology. And guarded means they're just not really sure. It could go one way, it could go another way. So I guess there's a lot of that.
I didn't realize how bad my anxiety was until I got cancer. And then I realized that that's really what I needed to deal with more than the cancer. Because the cancer, I'm doing the things that some people do when they have it. I'm in conventional treatment now and doing alternative treatment at the same time. But what it did is it's shone, is that a word? Shined, shone, I made up a new word, shined
Okay.
a spotlight on my already existing lifelong anxiety. And it took it to a level that I had never experienced because I was always an anxious person. I was born anxious, and I've suffered with panic attacks throughout my life, panic disorder, OCD, lots of stuff. And it's not stuff that I was ashamed of, but as Chef AJ doing a cooking demo, it like never would come out. It's not like you, like with your cancer. It wasn't that I was hiding my anxiety, but in the areas people were seeing me, they weren't making me anxious. So it's not something I talked about. But boy, cancer just brought it to a level that I didn't anticipate. And I'm curious, did you feel any anxiety when you were diagnosed? How did you handle it if you did?
I was lucky that the time between the diagnosis and getting it out was kind of non-existent because the MRI had said highly suspicious of malignancy, and then she did an ultrasound and she just said, you need to get this out. So it was out before I knew 100% that it was malignant. And I think that helped because even though I know cancer likes to come back and you never know, even if it looks like it's all gone, maybe it's not all gone and all those scary things. But the fact that I didn't have to deal with the C word until it was geographically no longer in my body, I think helped. And I think the other thing, AJ, is I have been so concerned about my husband and his health that anything that happens to me is just sort of like, okay, let's just deal with it and get past that because we've got this other thing happening over here that's taken so much energy.
It's interesting that you said that because that's another thing we have in common is my husband's health. I don't want to say is declining, but he has a serious cardiac issue now. And
No, bless his
I
heart.
literally bless his heart,
Literally.
literally bless his heart. And then the whole time I'm dealing with this, like I mean, I love all my dogs, but Bailey was the perfect dog. And like, so she was deteriorating the last year of her life since she had two strokes. And it's like, as you know, taking care of an ill loved one is really difficult.
It is really, really difficult. And this is so interesting as we're talking about these, really heavy life things. About, was it 9 years ago, maybe? I want to say 2016. I don't know when the last time was you were at Vegan Summerfest.
And it was when I got the award, and it's right over on my wall there. So I want to say, I think it's 2018.
Okay, so we were on a panel together, and it was a panel about aging. And if I'm correct, well, if it was 2018, then I was 68, and you're like 10 years younger than
I'm
me. Is that
exactly 10 years and a day younger.
okay?
Our
Okay.
birthdays are a day apart.
So amazing. Anyway, so here we are on this panel. Lovely, very serious convener of the panel, and she had obviously done a lot of research into what happens with elders. And I remember that we were not relating, and we were kind of writing notes back to each other. And one of her questions was, how do you deal with the depression that comes with being older? And it was not an apropos question because we weren't really older. I mean, maybe out in the world, people 58 and 68 might be dealing with stuff like that. But generally speaking, people who live like we do and think like we do, until something really comes from left field, we're happy. And now I think if we were on that panel again, we'd have a lot more to say that was really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I never think of myself as older unless I'm looking at a picture of myself when I was younger.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that having a diagnosis, it's got the gravitas of age, regardless of the age at which you get the diagnosis.
I want to say something if it's okay, because I pulled up a picture on my phone that I think you might find very interesting.
Okay.
It's not like every doctor I go to has to believe in God or I interview them. I like generally choose the best doctor, but just in the space of cancer,
Yeah.
it's helpful, when they are at least a little bit more open to healing coming from other places than a surgery or
Hmm.
like that. But I do when it's a new doctor, I will ask them. And so I had a funny situation happen when I finally agreed to get the lung biopsy, which was very difficult for me because my biggest fear, and unlike you, if I had maybe done what you did, because it was offered to me to get my whole left lower lobe removed the minute I was diagnosed, even though it wasn't confirmed to be cancer. And I remember the surgeon said, "Well, won't you be happy to have it out? And then if it wasn't cancer, oh well, but if it was, and I'm like, no. I'm really afraid of general anesthesia and surgery, and I have COPD, and I don't want to lose my whole lung, and I don't want to have a decreased quality of life because the quality of my life is more important than the length." But anyway, in order to get treatment, I did have to have a lung biopsy. There's a saying in cancer, no meat, no treat. Without the tissue, they don't know what to do for you. That's assuming you're going to have, like some kind of infusions. In my case, I'm having Keytruda. It's an immunotherapy, different than chemotherapy. But at the very beginning, it's like that old saying, you can't get a show on Broadway till you have a show on Broadway. You can't get an oncologist till you have a tissue sample. But I couldn't get a tissue sample because the tumor at the beginning was too small. And that's another reason I didn't tell people at the beginning, because my good friend Dr. Doug Lyle and Dr. McDougall, who was amazing, helping me so much. I could talk to him on the phone or Zoom with him anytime just for comfort, because he believed that the cancer was slow growing and that I was going to die with it instead of from it. You know, they both felt like, because he had said, if you want me to come on your show and, hold your hand when you tell people, because I don't, he goes, it was so slow growing. It's 3 years now since they were discovered, the tumors. And it didn't seem like to alarm people for something that was like, well, this is a baby, right? It wasn't really until it jumped seemingly overnight from stage 1 to stage 3 with a metastasis. Then it was like, well, I guess this is serious, and then maybe we should tell people. But anyway, by then, by the fact that it grew means that I could have the lung biopsy now, because when it was 14 millimeters, the radiation interventional radiology are saying, it's kind of going to be really too small to biopsy, but at 28 they could. And I remember going in there and I said, most people just have it done, but I have to meet the person first. And it's like, if you're going to be doing a procedure on me, I want to meet you. And so they went to the trouble of doing that appointment, even though it's a little bit inconvenient and they don't like doing it. But he was very nice. And I said, listen, if it's not too personal, do you believe in God? And he says, well, he goes, well, I'm Catholic, but my wife's really Catholic, meaning like and I said, listen, I said, that'll do, you know. But the funniest thing happened, and he even was like, you have to send me this picture to text my wife. So also it's harder sometimes because I'm so afraid with my anxiety of anesthesia that I do everything that I can do without sedation. So I had an endoscopy, which is really difficult without sedation, and a colonoscopy without sedation. Thank goodness Dr. Nedley was willing to do that in me. So I was having this lung biopsy without sedation because I'm more afraid of the sedation than any pain. But you have to be, when you're not doing sedation, you got to be really still. You can't be moving around, which you would think somebody for anxiety would be, but I'm more anxious if they put me to sleep. And I did end up getting a pneumothorax, not because I was moving around, but that's just one of the risks. And so he gets the sample and he puts a bandage on my back. I can't see it. And he says you can take it off in 3 days. And 3 days later, we take the bandage off, and Charles goes, "Wow!" And he took a picture. I don't know if you can see this. I know.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
so for those that are listening, it's a cross. It's a purple cross on my back, and it's like, how did it get there? So it's like, I don't know. And he was like, this is amazing. So what can I tell you? I found it very, I made a funny social media post saying, for all you believers out there, and I said, for those that don't believe, why the heck was the surgeon playing tic-tac-toe on my back?
Wow, wow, that's amazing. I have a little button on my bathroom wall. My bathroom wall is kind of I don't know, it's like an art exhibit of all the stuff that I care about veganism and animals and people I care about and New York City. And one of the things is a little button that my daughter put in a Christmas stocking years ago. And she's very rational, very like humanist. And I think if you ask her, she would tell you she's agnostic in terms of believing in God. I figure she's got time to get over that. Terrible. But she knows I'm like I am. And so she got me this little button that said, I don't believe in miracles. I depend on them. And so when I see something like this thing that happened to you, and I understand that it could just be some, perfectly rational, that's what it looked like. And yet there's just hope in something like that.
I don't know. I found it really fun, really funny, really comforting, and it just made me feel good. So, and here's the thing, somebody once said to me, even if God didn't exist, if in I find I have more comfort believing that He does or she
Yeah.
does. If at the end of my life I'm wrong, which life will have been more comforting to me? To go around thinking that there's nobody that cares or in charge, or that there is somebody. So I don't know if you can necessarily prove it either way. So I'm just going
Yeah.
to go with what my heart feels. And yeah.
You remind me of when I was in sixth, seventh grade, there was a boy in my class who was an atheist. And I had heard of Madeline Murray O'Hare, famous atheist at the time. I didn't know any others because in those days, I mean, everybody, they at least said they believed in God, whether they did or not, because that was just how it was supposed to be back then. But he was very, very vocal that he was an atheist, but he still taught Sunday school just in case he was wrong.
That is very, very fun. There's an old joke. What do you call somebody? What do you call an atheist in a coffin?
What?
Someone all dressed up with no place to go.
That's good. I like that.
There's an old saying, there's no such thing as an atheist in a coffin. I don't know if that's true, but sometimes I feel like saying there's no such thing as an atheist in a PET scan machine. And although people could argue saying, oh, I have cancer, I had cancer, I'm an atheist, it just seems like at least for me and the people that I've met in my groups, that people of faith go deeper in their faith rather than just saying, oh, we'll see, God's not real because I have cancer. And a lot of times people that had let their faith go or are kind of on the fence get I mean, of course, I'm sure there are other people that say, no, absolutely, it didn't happen for me, but I can only speak to the people I met that they often go even deeper in their faith when they're facing a healing crisis.
Right. And the reality is that birth is fatal, and whether we live a really long time or not. I always think about that address that Queen Elizabeth II gave when she was first queen, and she was promising the British people that they would always come first for her. And I remember she saying that wonderful upper class British accent, whether my life be long or short. And obviously it was very long. But the truth is, we don't know, and we're all heading out. And yet, as we alluded to early on, and I'd love to get more of your opinion on this, as vegans, illness is very hard. Death before, I don't know, 98, very hard, just not supposed to happen. So, how can we deal with the reality of life and the body, which is not us anyway? I think anybody that's at all spiritual knows we're not the body, but the body can have some problems. And certainly as we get older and the world is not very clean and pristine, things happen. So what do we do to be honest and real and still not get people to say, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to go have a steak because of what happened to them?
Well, that's a really complicated question, and we can go down many different avenues to answer it. But the thing is, I think it comes down to why a person is vegan in the first place, right? Because if somebody like us are, I mean, at least for me, I became vegan for ethical reasons first and foremost.
Mhm.
And so I know many people have said to me, well, now that you have cancer, this is the answer, keto diet or animal products. I'm not going to eat an animal to save my own life. And I don't think that's the answer anyway, but I'm just not going to do it. But if people are vegan for other reasons, like let's say just because it's a great way to lose weight or because it helped reverse some other disease they had, maybe high blood pressure or things like that, there's a lot more wiggle room. When you're an ethical vegan, there's no wiggle room, So I think people expect a lot out of the vegan diet or the plant-based diet, and diet cannot cure everything. It helps so many things, but I think people fail to realize that genetics plays a huge, if not greater role in just about everything happens to you, even where weight loss is concerned. It's such a huge component, and people don't seem to acknowledge as that as much. I think one of the best explanations I heard was from Dr. Simran Malhotra, who's a cancer previvor. And she said the plant-based diet is a seatbelt. It's a good idea to wear your seatbelt all the time when you're driving. But that doesn't mean that you won't get in a car accident. And it doesn't mean that you won't get in a fatal car accident. And so I think the plant-based diet is wonderful for so many things that it can do, but it can't do everything. And realize that most of us weren't born vegan, right? So we've had years, I mean, in my case, it was 17 years, but years of eating animal products and processed food and also, environment. People say, like, how did you get lung cancer? I joke, well, I lived in LA 60 years. It's the same as smoking a pack a day?
Yeah, wow. I think I have heard some in the plant-based world that we don't need to worry so much about genetics because it's all about epigenetics. And that, is it genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger? And I think with all of this, as much as we want to be healthy and we want to eat as well as we know how, it gets back to, and if you don't have perfect health, it's your fault. You did something wrong. And again, if we're trying to encourage other people to be vegan for ethical reasons, who wants to join a club where being human or being mortal is a failure?
Absolutely. You know? And the thing is we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but there's the shame that vegans feel when they get sick, you know?
Well, and it adds on. I mean, certainly, anytime anybody gets a scary diagnosis, there's all kinds of things to worry about, and we need more support then than any other time. And to think we're going to get something else, although I think what certainly you have seen and others too, people really are kind. Now, people on social media sometimes aren't people, and so comments can happen there that are pretty mean.
Oh, you think? As they hide behind their picture of a flower and not even using their real name. You have to wonder, would they say the same thing to you if you were right in front of them? I think the bigger thing with the diet is that even within the vegan community, we talked about these diet wars, right?
Mhm,
And even today, I mean, I get so many emails to my help desk that if only I would do this version of the vegan diet, I could reverse my cancer.
mhm,
When nobody that really has a medical degree believes that it was even caused by what I ate, right? There's so many other factors. I believe it's the factors that are never talked, I don't want to say never, but rarely talked about in the plant-based community are the mental, spiritual, emotional components, stress components of disease. For
mhm,
that, you would talk to, and he'd make a great guest for you, I think, Dr. Matt Letterman, who totally believes that that can play a role on that stress can play a role on whether or not you get certain diseases or the genes express or they don't. But it's funny because I like going to different churches and synagogues. I find it really interesting, and I have a friend that's very open-minded, and we'll go not regularly, like we'll try different ones out. And so we went to one of the Jewish religion recently, and I was raised in the Jewish religion, and we were conservative. So there were at the time in 1960, I remember there was like Orthodox or Hasidic Orthodox, conservative and Reformed, and most of my cousins were Reformed. And I remember like that, like it seemed like Jews were looking down on other Jews if they were at what they would the top, because of
mhm,
course Orthodox Judaism, if you're an Orthodox Jew, is the best. It's the only way. It's the right way. So they would look down on the conservatives, who would look down on the Reformed. And the thing is the problem is Judaism as a religion seems to be, I don't want to say going by the wayside, but if they could just get along as a faith and unite, that might be better. And I feel like with vegans, we have like, the NHA, dietary perfection has to be SOS free. And then we have the raw vegans, and then, the high fat raw vegans and the low fat raw vegans. And then, we got the nutritarians and the starchitarians, and we've got, the junk food vegans, and we've got the whole food plant-based eaters that are oil free. But, there's so many different variations. And yet the idea is that they don't always get along with each other, and they point the finger at the other. And that's the thing that bothers me, is that you're not doing it right. You did the vegan diet wrong. If you had only done this version, you would have not gotten that disease, and if you would do it now, you would get better. And I don't believe that that's true. And it bothers me when they attack each other, when we're such a small amount of the world as it is. Just people that are vegetarian is such a small percentage of the world, people, that meaning people that even eat dairy and eggs. And one time I heard it was like 10%, and veganism was like 3%. And like healthy, it's like we're such a small group. Why don't we get along? Why can't we get along? It bothers me so much that we can't get along with our own kind.
It's very difficult. And I have seen people, because when you've been around this stuff as long as we have, I started on the path. I only claim my veganism from 1983 because before that I was still, half and half in the coffee when I was out and things like that. But I actually started on the path in 1969, long time ago. And I've seen so many people. And I've seen people get sick and die, and I've also seen people heal from all kinds of conditions eating different kinds of a vegan diet. We were talking beforehand that I'm not crazy about wheatgrass, and I went to one of the wheatgrass places once and didn't really enjoy that because the smell kind of makes me sick. But I've known plenty of people that have healed on that Ann Wigmore wheatgrass and sprouts and very low sugar and all that. So, who am I to say, or who's anybody to say what somebody else is supposed to follow? And then there's the thing too with conventional treatment or no conventional treatment. Now, that's a personal decision. How did you deal with that whole thing?
Well, I'm not, I think, before I answer that, if you don't mind, I'd like to say that people heal even when they're not vegan at
Yes,
times.
they do.
And, we'd like to say that the vegan diet is the best diet, which I do believe it is for so many reasons. But I interviewed a slew of people when I was diagnosed with cancer to try to see if there was some common denominators, kind of like Dr. Kelly Turner did, of the people that got well. And it was surprising how many people that I know, maybe they weren't interviewed by me, but I've met them in many of the cancer support groups that never changed their diet ever. And some even were like, I mean, some even said to me, it's like, I got cancer. Like, now is the time to eat cheeseburgers and brownies. And they still got better. They still got better. I mean, they didn't do nothing. They maybe had the surgery or whatever the conventional or the alternative treatment was. And that's why I think there's a component of healing that gets overlooked largely in the plant-based diet, where the message is it's the food, it's the food, it's the food. And the food is very important, but I don't think it's only the food. And then my thing in life now is to kind of try to point out to people that the food is really important. It'll help you look better, it'll help you feel better. If you need to lose weight, it can help with that. But it's not just the be all and end all, and that we're not looking at this other component, which I don't have a word for it, faith, spirituality, or whatever is causing, because I have a lot of stress, or I had, and I'm guessing you did too. You're taking care of your husband, and I'm not saying that that's what caused your cancer or my cancer, but I don't believe it helps ever.
Oh, Dr. Funk specifically said to me, when somebody who lives the way you do gets cancer, it is hormones and stress. And, I was kind of like, check, check. So, yeah. You said you didn't have a term. How about essential? I like that.
Well, it
Is
is.
it
I
from the
think it is.
essence of us?
I think it is. And, it, it's just a complicated thing, and people need to do what they feel is right for them.
Mhm.
But there are people that do everything and nothing works, and there are people that do less and everything works. So what's the secret sauce here? I wish I knew. That's kind of been my journey now. But for me, I feel like it's funny. I remember in my 40s, I've always, I mean, I really love doctors that will be my doctor because I question everything, and I don't just say yes to everything, and I fight with them. And I remember like in my 40s, I think I had a mammogram once and I had a colonoscopy once, and then I said, I'm done, because then I got interested in Dr. McDougall's work, who's saying, just don't do it. And so I stopped having these things. I did eventually have another colonoscopy because there was true medical necessity, and this was in the last couple of years. And so I remember going to doctors because, when I lived in the desert, I didn't have a vegan doctor, and they go, okay, what you do for your mammogram and colonoscopy? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to get it. Well, why? And I'm like, well, because I did not know. I didn't have a crystal ball. I did not know I was going to get diagnosed with cancer. I said, well, because even if I have cancer, I don't want to know, which is true because I would have rather not known. Mine was found incidentally. And I said, because I'm not going to do anything. And they go, what do you mean you're not going to do anything? I said, well, if I got cancer, I'd probably go to True North and fast, which I did. But again, even that, which is considered the most pristine diet because it's water only, it did help. And whether it's contributing to the slowing of the growth or the shrinking of the tumors, I don't know because I'm doing so many different things now. But I felt in my heart, and I didn't think if I was going to get cancer it would be lung. I never thought that. I had other ideas where it might hit me because I have this again, genetics. I have such a strong family history of cancer. All the men in my family had it. My father, my grandfather, my brother, who died very young of it, my uncle. I think I'm the first female that had it. So real strong family history. And I thought that if I ever got cancer, that it wasn't going to be caused by diet and lifestyle. It was going to be caused by what you're calling essence or these other things, stress. and that's what it would have to be dealt with. And that's what I'm dealing with now. And so maybe the wake up call is that these are things I probably should have dealt with a long time ago. The inability to handle stress, or I shouldn't say the inability to handle it, but my reaction to it. I think about, I'm wondering if one of your favorite books is one of my favorite books because we have so much in common. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor.
Oh, Viktor Frankl, of
Wait,
course.
gosh, I wish he would just come back from the dead and talk to me. It would come.
He has, because he has a book. That's why
Yeah,
we write books.
I mean, when I think about like when I play these, I love playing games. I'm on a trivia team. I love having game parties, and a lot of times people say, if you could meet one person, living or dead, who would it be? And he's like at the top of the list. And one of the things he says in his books, Man's Search for Meaning, and his tenets was, it's not so much what happens to you in life that dictates the outcome, but your response to it. And so I've never really spent a lot of time working on controlling my stress or my anxiety. I mean, I have done a lot of things, but this is where the rubber meets the road now, and that's the avenue I've been going on. And that's why, when you asked me earlier, well, was it good that you came out? That everything is kind of a mixed bag. There's some good in it and some less good. Overall, it's been good. But the things that people are telling me, like for example, if I hadn't come out on YouTube, I never would have heard of a thing called Rachel's Vineyard. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is in Chinese medicine, lungs are grief, right?
Mhm.
And so I remember I haven't gone to, I mean, it's not that I would never go to an alternative place in Mexico. And people were like, why don't you go here? Well, mainly because it's like $80,000. And it's not that I mean, I would go and I don't want to have to do a GoFundMe, and I would consider going. But I remember very early on having an interview with them, and one of the first questions on the phone was, well, what kind of cancer do you have? Lung cancer. And they go, oh, that's grief. What are you grieving? And
Mm.
I had forgotten, I didn't really forget, but it wasn't foremost in my mind about all these miscarriages I had 25 years ago, fetal losses. And one was very, very late in the pregnancy. And I never dealt with that, not because I didn't want to, but because there were no resources in place 25 years ago to help people heal from that. And then one of the viewers, not one, many said, hey, you need to go to Rachel's ministry, Rachel's Vineyard. It's in again, Catholic Church. They're the only people, even though they're against abortion, they're the only people that really help people with this. I'm going to be having the psychologist that created the program on the show, Teresa Burke, and it's a place to help people heal from the fetal loss of either miscarriage or abortion or both. And when you have these fetal losses, that, and again, this is what they call it. I call them babies. They call them tissue. Uh, there's really no place, at least there wasn't 25 years ago, because if you don't have a body, you can't really have a funeral, right? And if you have like in my case with the babies dying inside of me, it's not really conducive to having a body to have a funeral. And back then, I'd try to get into like a group or therapy, and it was like there wasn't anything in place, or where they'd say, hey, well, it wasn't a real baby. And it's like, what? What do you mean? Like this kid was almost born. Her name was actually going to be Rachel. And that's why, and so going to that weekend was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I'm the only like non-Catholic there, or technically non-Christian. And who knew healing would come, from the Catholic diocese, because this beautiful weekend they created where we were able to have a funeral for our children. And so I carried that for 25 years because I couldn't get anybody to understand other than people that have gone through it. And so I'm with all these other women, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful healing experience. And so I believe my healing's going to come from the neck up.
Well, it's certainly powerful. Everything you're talking about is so powerful. And I think some of the things that we do in the vegan world, and maybe even a little bit more in the vegan world before we got all our wonderful medical doctors. And I love them, but I remember when we didn't have them. I remember meeting Dr. Michael Clapper in 1983, I think. And it was like, he's a what? He's a medical doctor? We don't have those. But I do think that in those prior days, when if we had any healthcare people at all, they were naturopaths or chiropractors or herbalists or somebody like that. there was a little bit more of the spiritual stuff talked about, and even fasting, which you mentioned at True North. Fasting is obviously for physical healing, but it's also a long time spiritual practice. So I'm interested in hearing what you think about that, your experience at True North, and what it's like when fasting is really hard. And
Oh
then I'm
my
going to
God.
weigh in on it. It's being really hard for me
Well,
these
it's really
lately
hard
too.
because I never fat when I used to have, how many 75 pounds of extra body fat on me, and I never tried to fast then. So, fasting by the time I started my water fasting there, I was only 109 pounds. And so I didn't have a lot of reserves, so I never made it past 4 days. But what was interesting is even though it wasn't that long of a fast, one of the things that was so miraculous, and I've done it twice now at True North, and I'm actually going back this month I go for a couple of weeks, a couple of times a year, because for me it's a place of tremendous healing, even if you don't fast. Why? Because I have the most amazing doctor who is a person of faith, Peter Sultana. He doesn't talk about that, and maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it, but I know he is. And sometimes when you have a doctor as caring as Dr. Sultana, I see him every single week since I got cancer on Zoom. And when you have somebody, whether he's believes in God or not, but with that kind of, when I say faith, just faith that you can get well, and somebody that's that smart medically, that cares about you, that makes such a difference than going into some oncologist that you're meeting for we have a history of 15 years together. And so seeing him in person, it just lights me up because he's like such like lovely is an understatement, right? And I do think that there's a component of healing in just in the doctor patient relationship. Plus the fact that it's one of the funnest places to go. And my husband has been going with me for 15 years and he's never fasted. It's just you talk about being with like-minded people, people on the path to wellness. People are going there for different reasons. And then, of course, you have Dr. Goldhammer, who, like, talk about stand-up comedian. He's not one, but he may as well be because he's so engaging and fun. And then, of course, the food there, when you're not fasting or when you're coming off the fast or before the fast, Ramses Bravo and Chef Mauricio, the food there is incredible. And it happens to be SOS free and plant perfect, but they make it taste really, really good. And you don't have to cook it yourself. But the kindness and the warmth and the caring, all the doctors there, they're not there to make millions, obviously, because there's other jobs in medicine that could pay them a lot more. They're there to see what they see every day, the miracles of people getting well from serious things, certain cancers even, but often diabetes and heart disease and autoimmune disease. And they seem to love their jobs. And even, everybody there is so nice. The housekeepers, it's the warmest place I can think of. And when people say, "Oh, it's so expensive," I'm like, "Have you ever stayed in a hotel in California?"
Yeah.
Because I've never seen a hotel in California with a rate that low. Plus, you're getting 3 buffet meals a day and 2 to 3 lectures a day. But I guess everything is relative in life. So, and not only I did a lot of fasting during my infusions. I don't, you didn't have infusions, so you probably weren't told to do this, but there's evidence that, I believe it's from Dr. Walter Longo at USC, that if you fast the day before, the day, in chemotherapy and immunotherapy are in the same boat. They're infusions, even though they're completely different mechanisms of drugs. Immunotherapy is supposed to be gentler. It's not it's not killing everything. What immunotherapy does is actually enhances your own immune system to fight the cancer. It's newer and generally I don't want to say considered safer, but just fewer side effects for most people, that kind of thing. But there's evidence to show that if you fast the day before, the day of, and the day after treatment, that it works better. So I've been doing that during my infusions too. But I think it does it's not fun to fast, at least not for me. But it gets easier after a while. And I will tell you that if anybody has the experience of fasting, what's really helped me with, and I wish I had done it when I was still overweight or obese, is that hunger isn't such an urgent thing anymore. It doesn't mean that I don't want to eat when I'm hungry, but I know now, like when hunger is delayed, I don't freak out because I say to myself, wait a minute. Okay, you're hungry now. You're not going to be able to get food for 2 hours, but you went 4 days without eating. So you're going to be fine on this airplane or whatever. It changed my relationship to food and hunger.
That's really interesting because after I had the lump removed by Dr. Funk, one of her suggestions was to either fast for 5 days or do the Walter Longo fasting mimicking diet for 5 days, and that would cause an infusion of stem cells that one wouldn't get otherwise. And I looked at the fasting mimicking diet and I didn't like it. It seemed pretty processed and everything. So I did go to Balance for Life and fasted for the 5 days, but it was so hard. And I have a long fasting history. In my 20s, I used to do it a lot because that was when I did have the 60 plus extra pounds. I think my longest may have been 28 days. I did 22 days, and once I did 17 days and went to work every day. Usually I went to the hygienic institutes and, rested and had supervision, but, I was young and thought I was invincible. And did that 17 days, went to work, climbed the stairs. I was in like a third floor walk up at the time. And I mean, it was challenging, but nothing like this time. And then also, I fasted in, I think it was 2018, and that was really hard. So I don't know if it's being older or being thinner or the combination of both, but I was just immobile. And it was really, really hard to move. And just the idea of, oh my gosh, I think I have to get up and go to the bathroom. Maybe I can push it off 10 minutes or something because just the energy simply wasn't there. Did you experience any of that?
Well, definitely the energy is not there. And so I didn't have any spiritual awakenings or anything like that when I fasted. I remember growing up Jewish, we would fast for Yom Kippur, but it was a dry fast and it was 24 hours. It was dinner to dinner. I don't think withholding water is good, but 17 days, Victoria, that is absolutely amazing. And my understanding is you're supposed to be at complete rest and not be walking up and down steps and things like that. I can't imagine trying to do it at home. I mean, I feel completely cared for at the True North Health Center where you're being checked on at least 4 times a day. And there's a little button like when you can call, like if you have an emergency during the fast. So I felt very safe doing it there. They do modified fast there, juice fasts, broth fasts combination. And generally when I has struggled on the water fast, they don't just feed you right away. You kind of transition to like the broth and
Mhm.
the juice. And that's the cool thing about fasting is, what I would say is for people, like one of the uses, I don't think people should go there with the expectation of losing weight, although they will, but it can really help people with taste neuroadaptation because when you fast, all the sugar, fat, and salt that's constantly assaulting your taste buds, if you are eating that, and then you start refeeding, like just like I said, the broth, like, oh my God, this is like the best thing I ever ate. Juice. Oh my God, this is and then the watermelon chunks, and it's like manna from heaven. And then the steamed zucchini. Most people wouldn't have that kind of reaction to those simple foods, but that's what it really does is it kind of retrains your taste buds and so that's I think that's the coolest part about going there is eating, and you can do that just by eating the food, by the way. You don't have to water fast, but it makes it go quicker and it makes you like the food quicker. So for people that really struggle, that can be a really good thing.
Mm. You're bringing back so many memories. So after one fast, I think it was my 22-day fast at an institute, and I came home and I'd been on, the juicy fruit and juices for a few days. And then I was eating, and people had had this little party set up for me, and I had a piece of raw cabbage and I spit it out because it was so salty. It's like, what did they do? Soak the cabbage in brine? But it was just cabbage. We don't really taste food. And then the other thing, the same fast, I believe, it was about day 21, and I had gone out on the bay there in St. Petersburg, where this place that no longer exists was. And I was lying on a beach chair and I really felt being supported by God or universe or whatever you want to call it, because for 3 weeks I had not ingested any kind of nourishment, no food, no juice, nothing like that. And yet I was sustained. And that for me really was spiritual experience in fasting.
That's incredible. What do you think about these people that say they're breatharians?
Um, Personally, I don't think I believe it. I mean, I know that I don't discount things that people say are impossible. There are a lot of people who say, like, the resurrection of Jesus, the physical that couldn't have happened. I don't know that it couldn't have happened. And I know that these matters are matters of faith. Um, I know that a lot of breatharians have kind of been found out. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm kind of learning in life, never say never, but then again, I
Exactly.
want to say, show me the evidence because it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to me how somebody could neither eat or drink for a long period of time and stay alive. But hey, you never know. I'm willing to suspend disbelief, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I think this is interesting, relevant to the whole plant-based movement, that we do have a lot of science supporting this diet, and it's wonderful that we have it. And yet, I always want to keep just a little room open for the spectacular and the unusual. And things that would have been considered miracles 50, 100 years ago are now just technology. So
Yep,
just to
absolutely.
say. We
Absolutely.
talked earlier, AJ, about the kind of diet wars within the plant-based world, but there's diet wars outside the plant-based world. So before I leave you, and I know we've talked a long time, but I have a couple more questions. Do you sense that we're in a different phase regarding veganism and plant-based diets coming from people who don't want to do this whole thing with carnivore diets and raw milk and all these things that we really hadn't heard with that kind of venom behind them now. So where do you think we are as a movement?
I don't know. I feel like we're divided in many ways, which is sad to me. But I also feel that more people are going vegan or plant-based for reasons other than ethics, which I actually think is a good thing. And I remember hearing one of the plant-based dietitians talking a long time ago that if you're not going to be vegan for the animals, don't bother. And I'm like, I don't think they care why a person doesn't eat them personally. And then we have a whole new set of people, like young people, that aren't necessarily concerned about ethics or their health, but are concerned about whether to have a planet to live on and the environment. So now I think having more than just one reason to go vegan will make more people vegan. And, we had a brief conversation before we logged on about this idea about reducitarian. And I think part of the problem with the vegan movement, which is, I think, part of the problem in religions, like when you think about when I mentioned Judaism is conservative, reformed, orthodox, is this all or none thinking. And it's like you have to be a perfect vegan or you're not vegan. And it's like, one of the things Dr. McDougall would say is that he ate an ounce of turkey every other Thanksgiving. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But the point is that made him, they didn't want him to speak at Summerfest. But the thing is if people ate less meat, it would still do a lot more for the animals and the planet than if they ate no meat. If they then, so that's the problem is that I think most people don't just go from, 0 to 100 like that. A lot of people take time to transition. And when we shame them and blame them and judge them because they're imperfect vegans, it's it doesn't help endear them to our cause. And I don't want to mention any names right now, but you might think of the person I'm thinking of. That when people are very, very pushy and make it like you have to do this for this, it I think it doesn't enroll people. I think it pushes them away. And so eating less, people complain about meatless Mondays. It should be meatless Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I agree. But any change people make in the direction of optimum health and wellness for whatever reason, it's not nothing when you think about how many billions of people are on the planet. And I also think that what Dr. McDougall has said for years about people wanting good news about their bad habits, for the people that like animal products really like them. I mean, I was lucky that I didn't like them. I was allergic to milk, and so that cut out a lot of things. And I was raised Jewish, so I didn't have, pepperoni and cheese with meat. I didn't have clams or crab. I didn't have a lot of the stuff, bacon that people love. But people that grew up that way, it's cultural, it's social, they love it. And it's not that easy. It's easy for people to judge, especially if they were raised vegan or have that ethical component. But I don't think they're realistic and realizing it's not just that easy for people to make a switch and make it overnight. And that's why I think we have to have some grace and some understanding and work with them that this just doing something is a good thing.
Mm.
I think with veganism, there's this all or none mentality. Either you are this SOS free vegan or forget about it. And no, because there's a lot of steps in between people can be taking to get there. And I think the better they feel, I think that's a big impetus because, I don't want to encourage people to try the carnivore diet, but I can't imagine a person feeling great on it unless their diet was so bad before, like a McDonald's 3 times a day diet. And anytime you move away from junk food and the standard American diet, you're going to see some improvement. But if how do they poop on the carnivore diet? That's what I'm thinking because there's no fiber. So I don't really understand that. And then you talk about the diet wars. One of the questions I invariably get, and it's funny because I don't even eat beans. So I'm this imperfect vegan according to the vegans. But one of the questions I almost always get when I speak is like, well, what about lectins? And it's like, I never even, up until a few years ago, I didn't know what a lectin was. I never worried about it. I never worry about the protein, all the things. There's just so much confusion and misinformation with nutrition. And that's why you've got to find your trusted source. For many of the people in the plant-based movement, it's nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Greger's website, very, very comprehensive as an example.
So, well, people are going to want to know, why don't you eat beans?
Well, because they just don't agree with me. And some of the immunologists I went to that did tests said that I'm actually allergic. Others just said it was an intolerance. But, that's the other thing. Well, is that why I have lung cancer? And I ate them until 2015, but it got to the point where I just got sick every time I ate them. And I did the experiment that Dr. Furman talks about where you eat 1 bean a day. And on day 20, I was just violently ill. They don't agree with me for whatever reason. And I love how Dr. Goldhammer always says there is no one food that everyone must eat. There's many ways to do a healthy vegan diet. It doesn't, I mean, beans are great, and then, people always say, well, the blue zones ate beans. The blue zones drank alcohol too, a lot of them, 4 out of the 5 of them, not Loma Linda. Should I drink, I feel like you're still a unique individual with your own genetics, and that's why there's just don't compare yourself to anyone except for the you that you used to be and the you that you want to be, maybe. But I don't know, it's so hard. I mean, sometimes I wish that I could just like disappear, not disappear and die, but like just kind of crawl under a rock for a while and not have to deal with some of the stuff that I'm sure you deal with too when you're in the public eye of being, criticized, especially when you're trying to do good. That's the hardest thing about it, is that I think we're both, and I think almost everybody, if not everybody, that's doing something in the plant-based world, I think they're doing it to try to do good. And, that's why I wish the infighting would stop. But, hey, think about sibling rivalry, Hatfields and McCoys. It's just a controversy, I guess, gets more clicks than getting along.
Well, we can get along, and I bet we get a lot of clicks. Oh, this is so much fun talking to you. I totally let the time pass when I was supposed to reach out and say something good about sponsors. So, sponsors, compliment wonderful supplements for vegans by vegans. Love compliment.com. They have a beautiful multivitamin complement for your wonderful plant-based diet. They also have this beautiful, clean, pure protein powder that if you use protein powder, this is just my total favorite in all the world. So do check out the good folks at lovecompliment.com. And if you use the code Main Street, all capital letters, you will get yourself 10% off, not just on your first order, but forever and ever and ever. Because I'm a grandfather, gosh, grandmother, I don't know. Anyway, that's that. And then I also want to let you know that coming up starting September 27th, is the 37th cohort of Main Street Vegan Academy. We have been training and certifying vegan lifestyle coaches and educators since 2012. The past couple of years, we've had the wonderful Chef AJ and her fabulous videographer husband, Charles Marshall, on our faculty. And our faculty is just full of amazing people. Chef Frank Costigan, Dr. Milton Mills, the beautiful fashion designer, Joshua Catcher. I mean, it's just such a sweet, dear, fabulous, wonderful program. And if you want to stay connected, we've got the best connecting going on. So do take a look. And in honor of the fact of the world that being a little bit difficult right now, I'm doing something I've never done before. And that is if you're my friend, you can come for half off. So because you listen to this podcast, you're my friend. So the code is friend, FRIEND capitals. And it'll never happen again, but it's happening now. So cool. And AJ's trying to say something.
Oh no, I just before you sign off, I just have to pay you a compliment or thank you for some advice you had given me years ago that's made a really big difference in my life. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with veganism, but it has to do with beauty and aging because you talked about that panel. You're 10 years older than me. No matter how old I am, you're always going to be 10 years older than me. And this was many, many years ago. And I think I was interviewing you, and I had mentioned how beautiful your skin was and what your secret was. And of course, we can always say it's the plant-based diet and the high fruits and vegetables and antioxidants. But you said that you don't put your face in the sun.
No.
And I thought, wow, what a novel idea. And here I was always baking with baby oil growing up and in LA. And then I got to the desert and my face was just all mottled. I mean, it's not now. And I didn't have any surgery or anything. When I got to the desert, the dermatologist, they saw that I was tan and they read me the riot act because, skin cancer is a real thing, especially in the desert. And so I had all the spots, burned off. It wasn't like a peel, but like, he would do a few at a time and he gave me, cream to get it healed. And to this day, since hearing that from you, and it's probably been close to 10 years now, I do go in the sun. That's why I don't have the most beautiful arms and legs, but the face, I don't let it. I wear full coverage hats and everything, glasses, sunscreen, and I always think about you when because people say, "Oh, your skin's so beautiful," and I said, "Well, that's because Victoria Moran said don't put your face in the sun."
Uh, and a lot of people will argue about that too. And again, we just have to do the research and use our own intuition and do what seems right to us. I'll tell you how I learned about the sun thing because when we were young, certainly when I was young, nobody was talking about any problem with sun. It was what this I'm trying to remember the old commercials, but basically you put on this oil that made you get more sun than if you
Like,
had nothing. But I was living in London. I moved there on my 18th birthday, and I was kind of befriended by this family. They were actually spiritualists. They were really interesting. And they really took me under their wing. And because I was like family, when their eldest daughter, who was 22 or 23, was coming home, they took me to the airport as part of the welcoming committee. Now, this daughter had spent 3 years in Israel lifeguarding. So here we are at the airport. And here's her mother with her beautiful English skin that, looked like she was about 17, and, the siblings and the beautiful English skin. And this daughter who had been in the sun for 3 years didn't even look like she was part of the family. The condition of her skin versus her mom's was just so different. And that was okay, stay out of the sun. Then I gave that to my daughter. And I remember once we first moved to New York, she was 17, and she said, "We have to cross the street. The sun is aging me." And it's like, okay, she stayed vegan and she stays out of the sun. If she gave up on some of the other mom stuff, well, okay. But some of the good stuff, carries on. Chef AJ, I love you so much. What do you
um,
want to say
I
before
love
we
you too. Well,
close?
I'd just like to say, one of the things that's so cool about veganism, especially from an ethical standpoint, and we have the mutual friend John Pierre that always talks about his ahimsa, is
Mhm.
everybody's going through something, and so just be kind and give people some slack because you don't know. And also, I want people to know I have anxiety.
Oh, bless you. And what do you do about it? Let's finish up with
Oh my
anxieties. We
gosh.
talked
Well,
about
I
it a
mean,
little in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I work with people that are smarter than me on how to deal with it. So I have a trauma therapist, and that was really what I love about my vegan doctor here that I came up for in the North, Dr. Neil Nedley, who runs a depression and anxiety program at Weimar, referred me to this wonderful therapist, Katie Cruz, for trauma therapy, 2 years on the waiting list. So that's one thing I do, and I'm learning skills. Like I had a lot of panic attacks recently because I was stuck on a plane for like 20 hours, and that's not so great for my nervous system. And like one of the tips that Dr. Cruz told me about, plunging your face in ice water. I didn't have the ice water on the plane, but at home I tried it and it sounded terrible, and it was kind of terrible, but it actually broke the panic cycle. It was really cool. So I'm working with her, doing things like going to Rachel's Vineyard, trying to heal things that need to be healed, and just doing the best I can. So what can I tell you? Trying to be more mindful and all these kind of things. We are who we are, I think, for the most part. But yeah, just trying to be a good person.
Mm.
And yeah, this kind of where I am right now. But working on myself. Probably should have done it sooner. But so much of my life was just about, making ends meet, paying the bills. I didn't really have the time or the luxury to indulge in some of these healing things that I'm doing now, which I think are the best if you have the time and the money. Like things that I'm enjoying, like acupuncture, Reiki, massage, and those kind of things that generally aren't covered by insurance, but are so healing to the body, mind, and spirit, especially those of us with those particular kinds of nervous systems. So those are the kind of things I'm focusing on right now. Is like, it's me time.
Wow, that's so interesting. And there are ways, sometimes I know here in New York, there's a wonderful school of acupuncture. And you snoop around enough, you can find things. I find for me, I never really used to keep straight the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, and I didn't think much about why I needed to, but I have since learned that the time I spend in the parasympathetic, the tend and befriend, as opposed to the sympathetic fight or flight, that's when I'm healing. And the things that I know take me there, acupuncture absolutely takes me there. Anybody who's never had acupuncture, it's like, oh my God, somebody just stuck needles in you. But it's a profound kind of relaxation that is, I think, very hard to get otherwise. Meditation, I've always meditated once a day, morning meditation. That's just been a thing for years. But I do it now twice a day because there's a lot of anxiety provoking stuff. And every minute spent in parasympathetic is a healing minute. So whatever you can
Absolutely. And
do.
that's what I'm hoping more mainstream doctors, especially oncologists, will try to discover. But the problem is there's nothing, I think, for at least me, more anxiety provoking than having cancer. I can't think of too many other things. You're so right about acupuncture. Get a good practitioner. And I call it acunapping. It's like this, it's like I don't know what it's like. I go under like for the whole hour, and then I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, it's like I just had like the bears, like
Hibernation, yeah.
it's
Yeah,
just
I know they've talked about using it even for anesthesia. And at first I didn't believe that, but I've had it enough now over the years to know, it could probably do that too. Although unlike you, this is one thing we don't have in common. I like anesthesia.
oh that's
I've only had it, I guess, 4 times in my life, but every time has been like, I really do believe life goes on and life after death and life before birth and all that. But if the people are right who think, okay, lights out, you know, that's okay too. This isn't like going to a big party and then you really just want to sleep. So I guess it's all good.
yeah, it's like you ask somebody, do they believe in reincarnation, and they say no, but I did in my last life.
That's great. AJ, God bless you in every way. I love you to pieces. It's no wonder that you are a giant vegan celebrity. Nobody deserves it more. Thank you for this time. Thanks to everybody who listened. Now let us go out and make Main Street vegan.